Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being patient. My name is Mally Rosado, and I'm calling to order this public comment meeting of Monday, January 11th, 2021, our first public comment meeting. On the screen, we have Councilwoman Marilyn Rossetti, Councilwoman Shirley Surgeon, Councilman Josh Mitchum, Councilman Nick LeBron, Councilwoman Wildalise Bermudez, Councilman James Sanchez, Councilman John Gale, and Councilman TJ Clark will be joining us shortly. To the members of the public, thank you for being patient with us this evening. I know that we were having technical difficulties on WebEx and we had to move over to our Zoom meeting. I also want to thank David for sending out this link so quickly. With that said, I'm going to read some rules for this evening. Public comment shall be conducted in accordance with the following procedures. Each person wishing to address the council or the committee, therefore, shall, upon recognition by the presiding officer, give his or her name and address, and if he or she represents a small group, shall in addition state for the record the name and the address of such group or organization, and shall limit his or her remarks to 3 minutes. Our remarks should be addressed to the council as a body and not to any individual council members. Any person making personal impertinence or slandering remarks or who becomes boisterous while addressing the council shall be forthwith banned by the presiding officer from future audience at said meeting unless permission to remain is granted by 2/3 votes of the council members present and voting. During public comment, there shall be no debate by the council, although questions may be asked by council of persons making such presentation. For the members of the community, please be advised that this meeting is being broadcast and recorded by the Hartford Public Access Television and can be viewed by Hartford Public Access TV Facebook, Comcast Infinity Channel 96, or Channel 6032 from Frontier customers. Language interpreters can be made available if requested in advance. So once again, I want to thank everyone for being patient. And the first person that we have on our list is Gannon Long. Gannon, you have the floor.
Hello, hi. Sorry, I didn't realize I was going to speak first. Thanks for having me today. Gannon Long, I live at 49 Hungerford Street. And Happy New Year, everybody. Glad to see you. I want to just really quickly applaud the council for your work on the parking lot tax. I know it's been a long haul. We've been talking about it for years. I was really glad. I was sad it got delayed, glad it got passed. So good work on that. I hope the mayor doesn't undermine that and you guys are able to make that happen. I also just wanted to ask you to rethink the electric golf carts for Keeney Park. Maybe there's a Keeney Park golfer, some sort of fund that those folks who use those can pay for that, but I don't think the city of Hartford should. So I hope you all can dismiss that. Golf carts just don't seem like a priority for the city of Hartford in January 2021. The main thing I wanted to talk to you about today, I think especially in light of the insurrection that we saw at the US Capitol this week, it's a really complex being a series of very complex and very American emotions surrounding that. But I think what's really important, and the more that we're learning about it, is there are clearly connections between law enforcement and that event. And I want to ask each one of you personally and collectively as a body to talk with Chief Thody. Honestly, I have really little confidence in Chief Thody's leadership, and I think a lot of us feel that way. But if you're confident in his leadership, get a list from him, get reassurance, and share that with the public that there were no Hartford police officers who were in Washington on Wednesday. Find out from him if he has any police officers, and he could work with the union chief as well, if there are any members of QAnon or followers of QAnon in the Hartford Police Department. And if you think this is a silly request, just go ahead and ask him, just share that with the public. There are multiple reports of police officers around the country, including in Connecticut, elected officials, obviously none of you, being at this insurrection. And I think that's really important that he come clean with the public. keeping in mind that 2 men have been shot in Hartford to death this year by police. And in the second incident, the Hartford police were there and had no body cams on. So when Chief Thody is telling people we're accountable, we're doing things, why were there not body cams on that were recording what was happening? Why was a New Britain police officer in Hartford shooting people to death? And the other incident, tragic, awful situation, but that situation should never have happened. Thank you, Mr. Gale. That should never have happened. And my heart is broken for the Hartford families that are dealing with this violence, but we really cannot just keep seeing these patterns of awful mismanagement continue at Hartford Police. And we need that assurance that Hartford officers were not in DC this week. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Gannon. The next one on our list is Leslie Hammond. Leslie, you have the floor.
Good evening, Council. Leslie Hammond, 1 Linden Place. It's great to see you all, your faces, and Happy New Year. And, you know, I know we've had our disagreements over this past year, but I have to admit, like, seeing what's happened this past Wednesday, I'm like so happy to know that all of you are on the same page as I am, and that you're appalled and angry and incredibly sad over what happened. And that really means a lot when I think of what so many people, so many Democrats have to go through in towns and states in America. That, you know, as much as we might disagree, I'm like really, really grateful. I really mean that. So along the line of what Gannon was talking about, I've been thinking about Mr. Ogman, who was killed on Gilman Street. And I really hope we can do better with mental health. It's obvious that the system failed him. And as you know, I'm in recovery in AA, and I really believe people have to want help. And I do believe that, but I also feel that we need to have more services. As you know, Joanne Bauer killed herself in March, and she had just connected with Wheeler Clinic. And then of course, because of COVID, they shut down and she wasn't connecting. And, you know, God knows what people are going through with COVID. I mean, it's already difficult, you know, with our mental health services. So I don't know if we can do more hotlines on the buses and the Hartford News, you know, make sure people know that there is a crisis line. I know with Joanne, we did call this crisis line. I didn't even know about it. Somebody else knew about it. And that was quite helpful at one point when she was in crisis. Somebody really talked us through to try to help us. Again, the person has to want help, and that's the tricky thing. And I don't know with Mr. Ogman, it does sound like he wanted help, didn't want help. And I know a lot of people go through that. So I'm very concerned about our budget and money, and I'm thinking ahead already is how can we, you know, really reorganize our money. And, you know, I just, you know, I know it sounds when you say take money from the police, some people get really thrown by that, but I think really think about where our money goes. Mental health, services for people, recreation, you know, our parks. I mean, it's desperate, maybe not the golf carts, even though I'm a golfer, you know, I hear Gannon on that one, you know, but really thinking about where we want our money to go, what best helps our city that's really suffering. I know you guys know that as much as anybody, that people are really suffering economically and mentally. I know I'm running out of time. I did want to get into some of the new people being hired, just, you know, concerned about out of city people. Do they get like 101? This is Hartford. I met a guy who's a planner who's here from Florida. There's a guy that just got hired as a 911 from Waterbury. So I'd be glad to do a tour director if people need a tour of Hartford. Thank you. Blessings.
Thank you, Leslie. I don't believe we have Dr. Deutsch on the line. We'll wait and see if he joins us. The next person is Mr. William Moffett. Mr. William, you have the floor.
Hello. It's been almost a year since I spoke. How things have changed. I'm glad Gannon said what she said, because I'm going to take that a step further. And you know me, when I come forward with these kind of things, it's from facts and from on the ground experience. January 6th, many people knew that there were going to be militia attempts. The coup had been set up long before. There'd been a lot of organizing going on before. And as stories have been coming out, we are realizing that many places were informed of this threat. Now, I had seen for the past almost 2 months since Biden had clearly was going to win the election, there were Trump people who were outside the Hartford Capitol, big groups, big signs, big caravans. Every Saturday I would go by and I would see these groups. And after a little bit, they got small, but then they started to get big. I knew that there was trouble coming, just like I knew 2 years ago when white supremacists marched through Hartford, and I tried to warn people that there's trouble brewing, that there was a lot of trouble brewing, and because we ignore them, things happen. Now, as far as I saw from a report on Fox 61 News, the state capitol was almost caught with its pants down, okay? It almost was not prepared to deal with it. Now, Hartford police, who were supposed to be there on the 6th, to work the crowd. Now, I was there in that crowd in the banana suit. There were probably 1,000 people there. That crowd could have went wild in any second. And those police had to leave. They had to leave because there was a shooting on Enfield Street. That shooting that a lot of weird, sketchy details are coming out from, a shooting, a collaboration between the feds. I demand we investigate who put the order on for that attack to happen on that day, at that time, when Hartford police should have been there to potentially protect an insurrection that everyone knew was going to happen. A lot of people might be shocked by what they saw on Saturday, but what I saw on Saturday was what I saw when Trump was allowed to speak at the Hartford Convention Center 5 years ago. The mass cult, we have mental health issues, we have people who are militarized, we ignore all these issues. It's not Trump's, it's our fault. It's because of people like Luke Bronin, because of people like Ned Lamont, and because of all of you, we are all complicit in what happened. And we're this close to not learning a single thing. Why are the restaurants, dining restaurants still open when COVID numbers are near 9%? Unemployment's at an all-time high, February 9th. The current employment, the docket of evictions, 30,000 people, last I checked. Only 7% of renters have representation, 80% of tenants. Why are we building expensive condos? Why are we doing all this nonsense? Why are we ignoring it? Why are we letting people die? This is a disgrace and a shame on all of you for your complicity. Thank you, I miss y'all. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Moffett. Next on our list is Ms. Alyssa Peterson, and then we will go back to Mr. Deutsch, who has joined us. You have the floor, Ms. Peterson.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Good evening, Council, and Happy New Year. I had to laugh when I saw your GPS tracking proposal for city vehicles other than fire vehicles. I doubt any of your council members know that fire vehicles have long had tracking ability at fire headquarters going back at least 12 years. One of Hartford's own, Leo Siri from Fairfield Ave, was one of those who implemented the program. I begged then Chief Ravella and Mayor Segarra to extend the tracking to police vehicles so that command staff could know that neighborhoods were being patrolled, but I was met with stiff opposition. It was common knowledge that officers and cars were sitting in substations for long periods of time or in parking lots. Maybe now we residents can learn if our neighborhoods are being patrolled or not, and when, on a monthly basis. I also wholeheartedly support the item assessing the permit fees for parking. For too long, parking has been a windfall for certain owners in Hartford at the expense of Hartford residents and the healthy redevelopment of lots into structures. I further support the item extending the period of time wherein the Historic Preservation Commission can review the necessity to preserve the G. Fox Bridge. It should not be difficult to prop this edifice up during demolition and construction of a new building. Hartford was once a Victorian gem. Now it's an ugly, nondescript city that has few architectural gems left, unlike New Haven, New London, or Norwich, or nearby Springfield. Council owes it to this city and to its residents to do what it can to preserve what few interesting structures we have left. As regards the residency requirement, I've already told this council that I support a limited requirement for school superintendent, police, fire, public health, and development services. Speaking of which, anyone notice that it's time to look for a new development director? And finally, as regards settlement of the Julian Perez matter for $250,000. I had to laugh that Mayor Bronin offered in his letter that questions could be posed by council to Corporation Counsel regarding this agreement. Like any of you were going to ask questions, get documents, or explain anything to the public about settlements, as you did not do in the Squilante versus Hartford matter. Good thing that people like myself have other means to do the investigative and complaint work that council was and still is unwilling to do. Stay tuned on that topic. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Next on our list is Dr. Larry Deutsch. You have the floor.
Thank you. Can I be heard?
Absolutely, you have the floor.
I see your lovely face on my screen as well. All right, I'll go as quickly as I can, of course, but I'd like to start and end with the clear request that each and every council member respond with his or her opinion to say agree, disagree, and in particular how they will work to accomplish the few things that I mentioned, which some of which I admit President Rosado may be a repeat. The first one on the parking lot fees, it seems some, including Mr. Laz, may object to fees and taxes on parking lots, but I would submit if we really believe we want more public transportation in the city, then we collect those fees and those taxes and channel them into reducing our reliance on automobile traffic, which nobody wants. And nobody wants to see all those parking lots for surface parking rather than good buses, maybe trolleys, and other means of public transportation. I think most of us nowadays agree on that. The second thing is, I know you, President Rosado, have compassion for the homeless individuals, and I do hope that you're taking good care of them, including cots, warmth, and good meals, so that we at least do the best we can in this difficult COVID circumstance, which worsens things versus last year. The next thing, I hope everyone, especially the women listening, are aware of the hazards of nail salons, which do not measure up to the ordinance that we had passed a couple years ago now, in order to have the safety of in those nail salons where they don't have fumes that could, well, if they're breathe them in constantly, can ultimately cause cancer. And many of these women who put the nail painting on may not have health insurance, let alone the patrons who utilize them. So I would beg to have the city council and the health director, Leanne Arroyo, of course, try to enforce to the maximum extent possible good, healthy standards in any nail salon. Otherwise, they lose their license. Simple as that. The last thing, next to the last thing, is I've urged the city council to increase the appropriation for DPW because of the fact that we have demonstrated that the salaries for the sanitation men and women and the truck mechanics in DPW are substandard. They're less than they are in most of the other towns around here, and it's hard work and it's exposure to difficult conditions, dirty, filthy stuff without having hazard pay. So the last thing, again, next to the last, is they must have hazard pay, and the city council must prepare the mayor in his presentation to improve the DPW budget. So let me come back to the first point. I am just like when I write to a state legislator or a congressperson, they answer with a letter saying, we have received your letter and we're taking into account. I anticipate and expect that all of the individuals on city council will send me by email, which is just my whole name straight at att.net, and tell me, what do you think on each of these points, especially the raises in the next upcoming budget for DPW, so that these men and women can get a decent, more than just a bare living wage and require a second job. Okay, so I wish everyone a good new year. Most of all, stay safe, of course, but let's make it pleasant for everyone and not just ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Deutsch. Councilman Sanchez?
I was just waving to Larry. I miss him
Oh,
too.
okay.
I'm waving to Jimmy, my good friend.
Thank you, Dr. Deutsch. Next to speak is Mr. Lovejoy. You have the floor.
Yes, ma'am. Can I be heard?
Yes, you have the floor.
Please pardon me. I'm in my mobile office and so have to make certain adjustments. I'd like
Okay.
to thank the council for allowing me to say just a few words. There are a few thoughts that come to mind. This morning, I was very honored to be with a group of Hartford leaders who addressed the issue of the safety of Hartford residents, the care, the concern that those who are public servants should have about our residents, namely the various fiascos that we have seen pertaining to law enforcement in our city. I was very honored to be amongst these individuals who are using one voice to build one community in our 18 square miles of city. I think that it is highly important that the mayor's office, as well as the city council, take into account that it was only last year where various cities around the country, including Hartford, declared racism as a public health crisis. We need to further examine how we address this crisis. Lastly, and I'll wrap up with these words, I believe that the residency of public officials in the city of Hartford is extremely important. For Hartford is a city of 18 square miles. It does not make sense for us to send our hard-earned tax dollars outside of the city for expertise that we may have inside of our city. Again, I thank you for this opportunity to speak. May God continue to bless Hartford and watch over us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lovejoy. And that concludes our public comment session for this evening. I want to thank Gil and his team over at Public Access TV for the great job that they do every day and how quickly they transition us over to Zoom. David, thank you for everything that you do on a daily basis. With that said, I am calling this meeting adjourned. Please join us at 7 p.m. for our regularly scheduled council meeting. Good night, everyone.